The blade stopped 3 inches from her throat. Kira froze, every muscle in her body locked as she stared at the human who had just saved her life. His name was Daniel Cooper, and according to every law in the Galactic Council, he should not exist outside of quarantine. "Get down," he said, pulling her behind a crumbling wall as plasma fire scorched the air where she had been standing moments before. The Vexori assault team was closing in, their war cries echoing through the ruined streets of Prelium Station. Kira's heart hammered in her chest. She was a diplomat, not a soldier. The peace talks had collapsed 3 hours ago, and now the Vexori wanted blood. Her blood, specifically, since she had been the one to propose the territorial compromise they found so insulting. "Why are you helping me?" she managed to ask, her voice barely a whisper. Daniel was checking a weapon she didn't recognize, something crude and mechanical compared to the energy weapons everyone else used. "Because you're the only one who actually tried to stop this war," he said. His eyes, a strange shade of brown she had never seen on any species, met hers. "And because I need your help to get off this station before it tears itself apart." Another explosion rocked the building. Dust rained down on them. Kira could hear the Vexori warriors getting closer, their heavy footsteps mixing with the screams of other fleeing diplomats. "There's no way off," Kira said. "They've blockaded every dock, every ship." Daniel smiled, and there was something unsettling about it, something that made her scales ripple with an emotion she couldn't name. "Then we'll make a way." He moved before she could respond, stepping around the corner and firing his primitive weapon. The sound was deafening. Nothing like the quiet hum of plasma rifles. 3 Vexori warriors fell, their armor punctured by whatever projectiles Daniel's weapon spat out. "Move," he commanded, and Kira found herself obeying without thought. They ran through the station's corridors, Daniel leading her through paths she didn't know existed. He moved with a precision that spoke of military training. But humans weren't supposed to have militaries. They were banned from warfare, banned from leaving their homeworld without strict supervision, banned from possessing weapons of any kind. Yet here he was, armed and dangerous, and somehow knowing exactly where to go. "The service tunnels," Daniel said, pulling open a panel that should have required maintenance codes to access. "They'll lead us to the cargo bays. There's a smuggler ship that owes me a favor." "How do you know all this?" Kira asked. But another plasma blast cut off any answer he might have given. They dropped into the tunnels, landing hard on metal grating. The space was cramped, lit only by emergency strips that cast everything in red shadows. Daniel pulled out a small device and checked it, then gestured for her to follow. As they moved through the darkness, Kira's mind raced. Humans had been restricted for over 2,000 years, ever since the Council discovered their homeworld. The official reason was always vague, something about their unstable nature and propensity for violence. But nobody talked about the real reasons, the classified files that only the highest Council members could access. "There," Daniel said, pointing to a ladder. "We go up, we'll be right by Dock 17. But as Kira reached for the ladder, alarms began shrieking throughout the station. Not the attack warnings they had been hearing, but something worse. "Lockdown protocols. They're sealing the station," Kira said, her blood running cold. "They're going to vent the atmosphere. Kill everyone aboard rather than let the Vexori take it." Daniel's expression didn't change. Then we moved faster. They climbed, Kira's limbs burning with effort. Above them she could hear the massive blast doors beginning to close, could hear the hiss of air being redirected. They had minutes at best. When they reached the cargo bay, chaos greeted them. Ships were trying to launch, ramming into each other in their panic. Bodies floated in the vacuum where hull breaches had already occurred. And standing between them and the only ship still intact was a squad of station security, their weapons raised. "Stand down," the lead officer commanded. "That human is under arrest." Daniel raised his weapon, but Kira stepped in front of him. "No," she said, an idea forming in her mind. A desperate, insane idea. "He's not under arrest. He's my husband. We were just married under Prelium Station law, which means he falls under diplomatic immunity." The security officer stared at her. "You married a human?" "I did," Kira said, forcing confidence into her voice she didn't feel. "And as my spouse, he has the right to leave this station with me. Now let us pass, or explain to the council why you detained a diplomat during an active crisis." The officer hesitated, and in that moment of hesitation, Daniel grabbed Kira's hand and ran. They made it to the ship, a battered freighter that smelled of engine coolant and something organic Kira couldn't identify. Daniel sealed the airlock behind them and rushed to the cockpit. "Can you fly?" he asked. "No." "Then hold on." The ship lurched away from the dock, engines screaming. Behind them, Prelium Station was tearing itself apart, explosions blooming across its surface like deadly flowers. The Vexori fleet closed in, but Daniel pushed the ship into a debris field, weaving through wreckage with a skill that should have been impossible. When they finally cleared the combat zone and jumped to hyperspace, Kira collapsed into a seat, her entire body shaking. "What did I just do?" she whispered. Daniel turned to look at her, and his expression was unreadable. "You married a human," he said quietly, "and now you're going to learn exactly why that was forbidden." The war between the Vexori Imperium and the Thelian Confederacy had been brewing for decades, but it took only 3 days for it to explode into full-scale carnage. Kira had spent those decades working toward peace, building relationships, negotiating compromises that satisfied no one but prevented bloodshed. Until it all fell apart on Prelium Station, and she found herself bound to a member of the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The freighter they had escaped on belonged to a Crixian smuggler named Voss, who greeted them with a mixture of amusement and horror when he realized what Kira had done. "A human," he kept saying, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. 87. "You actually married a human." "It was the only way to invoke diplomatic immunity," Kira explained for the 3rd time. They were in the ship's cramped common area, the walls covered in stains she chose not to identify. "The marriage will be annulled as soon as we reach council space." "Annulled?" Voss laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "You think the council recognizes annulments with humans? Once you're bound to one, you're bound for life. It's in the restrictions. They wanted to make sure no one would ever be tempted to form permanent connections with them." Kira's primary heart skipped a beat. "That's not possible." "It's very possible," Daniel said from where he sat cleaning his weapon. He hadn't looked at her since they boarded, his attention focused on maintenance tasks, with an intensity that made her nervous. The council was very thorough when they wrote the human protocols. "How do you know so much about the protocols?" Kira demanded. "How do you know about council security, station layouts, smuggler routes? Humans are supposed to be confined to Earth, monitored constantly. You shouldn't know any of this." Daniel finally looked up, and there was something in his eyes that made Kira take a step back. "We're not all confined," he said quietly. "Some of us escaped. Some of us have been living in the shadows of council space for a long time, watching, learning, waiting. Waiting for what? For humans like me to be useful," he said. "For wars like the one brewing between the Vexori and Thelians to create enough chaos that we could start moving freely again. For opportunities." Voss made a nervous sound in his throat. "I'm going to check the engines," he muttered, hurrying out of the room. Kira sat down across from Daniel, her mind racing through the implications. "You used me," she said. "The rescue, the escape, This whole thing was planned. No, Daniel said, and his voice was firm. The rescue was real. I was on that station gathering intelligence when the talks collapsed. I saw the Vexori moving to execute you, and I made a choice. Everything after that was improvisation. Intelligence for whom? For the Human Resistance Network. We have people scattered across Council space, watching, reporting, preparing. The Council thinks they have us contained, but they're wrong. They've always been wrong about us. Kira felt her scales ripple with agitation. The Council restricted humans for a reason. The files say your species is too dangerous, too unpredictable. You wage war on yourselves, destroy your own environments, create weapons designed for nothing but killing. They quarantined Earth to protect the galaxy. Daniel set down his weapon, his movements careful and controlled. Let me tell you what really happened, he said. 2,000 years ago, a Council exploration ship found Earth. They saw a species that had just developed faster than light travel on their own, something that usually takes 10,000 years of guided evolution. They saw weapons that could crack planets, defenses that could stop fleets, a military culture that had survived thousands of years of constant warfare. That sounds like exactly why you needed to be restricted. They were terrified, Daniel continued as if she hadn't spoken, not because we were violent, but because we were effective. Because in their war games and simulations, every single scenario where humans joined the galactic community ended with humans eventually dominating it, not through conquest, not through force, but through sheer competence. So they made a choice. They classified us as dangerous, locked us away, and made sure no other species would ever want to ally with us. Kira shook her head. That's conspiracy theory. The Council wouldn't do that. Wouldn't they? Daniel leaned forward. Think about it, Kira. You've spent your whole life working for peace, building bridges between species. And what has it gotten you? The Vexori tried to kill you because you compromised. The Thelians abandoned you when the fighting started. The Council will probably censure you for involving yourself with me. You've given everything to a system that doesn't value your efforts. That doesn't make the system wrong, Kira argued, but her voice lacked conviction. Daniel stood, walking to the viewport where the stars streamed past in hyperspace. The Council has maintained peace for 10,000 years, he said, but it's a peace built on inequality. Some species get voting rights, others don't. Some get military protection, others are left to fend for themselves. Some, like humans, get imprisoned on their own world for crimes they haven't committed. Is that really the peace you've been fighting for? Before Kira could answer, alarms started blaring. Voss's voice crackled over the intercom. We've got trouble. Big trouble. There's a Council warship demanding we drop out of hyperspace for inspection. Kira and Daniel rushed to the cockpit. Through the viewport, she could see the massive bulk of a Council enforcement vessel forcing them out of faster-than-light travel. It was a Mandate-class cruiser, powerful enough to vaporize their small freighter without slowing down. They're hailing us, Voss said, his hands trembling on the controls. Answer it, Kira said. I'm a diplomat. They'll have to recognize my authority. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a face Kira knew all too well. Commander Helen Price, head of Council Security's Special Enforcement Division. A human, ironically, though one who had been raised in Council custody from birth, trained to hunt her own kind. Kira Thelox, Helen said, her voice cold and professional. You are under arrest for unauthorized marriage to a restricted species, aiding in the escape of a quarantined individual, and violation of Council Decree 773. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Commander Price, I invoke diplomatic immunity, Kira said quickly. I'm a registered diplomat of the Thelian Confederacy, and my actions were taken during a crisis situation. I have the right to legal representation before any arrest. Helen's expression didn't change. Your diplomatic status was revoked 3 hours ago by unanimous council vote. The Thelians requested it themselves. You're a civilian now, Miss Thalox. Power down your engines. Kira felt the deck dropping out from under her. The Thelians had abandoned her. Her own people had thrown her away the moment she became inconvenient. Do it, she told Voss quietly. We can't outrun them. But Daniel had moved to the weapons console, his fingers flying over controls. Voss, on my mark. Dive into that asteroid field at bearing 273. Are you insane? Voss shouted. That field is a navigation hazard. We'll be torn apart. We'll be torn apart if we surrender, Daniel said. Price doesn't take prisoners. Everyone she's ever arrested has disappeared into Council black sites. Now do it. The freighter lurched as Voss threw them into a desperate dive. The Council warship fired, but Daniel had already activated countermeasures Kira didn't know the ship possessed. Chaff exploded around them, confusing the targeting systems long enough for them to reach the asteroid field. What followed was the most terrifying 5 minutes of Kira's life. Voss piloted like a madman, weaving between massive space rocks while the Council ship fired particle beams that turned asteroids into clouds of superheated debris. Daniel worked the defensive system, somehow anticipating every shot before it was fired, adjusting their trajectory to put solid rock between them and death. There, Daniel said suddenly, pointing to a massive asteroid with a crater on one side. That crater goes deep. Get us inside. That's not a crater, that's a cave system, Voss said. We'll be trapped. Trust me. Voss cursed in 3 languages but dove for the crater anyway. They plunged into darkness. The freighter's running lights the only illumination. The tunnel twisted and turned, barely wide enough for their ship. Behind them, Kira could hear the Council vessel trying to follow, its larger bulk scraping against the walls. Then Daniel did something to the controls, and explosives they hadn't known were there detonated behind them. The tunnel collapsed, sealing them in but also blocking their pursuers. There's another way out, Daniel said calmly. Keep following this tunnel. It'll lead to an old mining station on the far side. How do you know that? Kira demanded. Because this asteroid field is where the human resistance has one of its bases, Daniel said. We're going to meet some friends of mine. And then, Kira, you're going to have to make a choice about which side you're really on. The mining station was a relic from before the Council's formation, built by a long-extinct species whose name had been lost to time. Its corridors were too large for most modern species, designed for beings twice the size of humans. But it still had power, still had life support, and still served as a hidden refuge for those who couldn't exist in Council space. Kira walked through those corridors in a daze, her mind struggling to process everything that had happened in the past 6 hours. She had gone from respected diplomat to criminal, from working within the system to running from it. And all because she had tried to save one human's life. Daniel led her to a large chamber that had been converted into a command center. Dozens of humans worked at various stations, monitoring communications, analyzing data, planning operations. They all stopped and stared when Daniel entered with Kira in tow. Everyone, Daniel said, his voice carrying across the room. This is Kira Thalox. She's my wife, according to Council law, which means she's under our protection now. A woman approached, older than Daniel, with gray streaking through her dark hair. Your wife, she said, and there was skepticism in her tone. You married a Council diplomat. I married the woman who spent 20 years trying to prevent a war, Daniel corrected. The woman who was willing to sacrifice her career to find a peaceful solution, The woman who, when given the choice between following orders and doing what was right, chose right. The older woman studied Kira for a long moment. "I'm Lisa Grant," she said finally. "I lead this resistance cell. Daniel's told me about you over the years, said you were different from other council bureaucrats. I hope he's right." "I don't understand what's happening," Kira said, her voice small. "I thought I was helping prevent a war. Now I'm here, in a secret base, surrounded by the species I was taught to fear. Daniel says the council has been lying about humans, but I don't know what to believe." "Then, let me show you something," Lisa said. She led Kira to a large view screen and activated it. "These are communications we've intercepted over the past month. Council transmissions, encrypted, classified. We've been decrypting them for weeks." The screen filled with text, reports, strategic analyses. Kira read them, her heart sinking with each line. The council knew the peace talks at Prelium Station would fail. They had known for months. More than that, they had wanted them to fail. The war between the Vexori and Thelians served council interests, weakening two species that had been growing too powerful, too independent. The talks were theater, a way to appear concerned while doing nothing to prevent the inevitable bloodshed. And Kira's efforts, her genuine attempts at peace, had been seen as a problem. The reports recommended her removal from the negotiations, suggested that her success might interfere with strategic objectives. "They were going to let me die," Kira whispered. "The Thelians, the council, they knew the Vexori were planning to attack the diplomatic quarter. They could have warned us, evacuated us, but they didn't. They sacrificed you," Lisa said quietly. "Just like they've sacrificed countless others. The council maintains peace through manipulation, through controlled conflicts that prevent any single species from becoming strong enough to challenge them. And humans, we're the biggest threat to that system. Not because we're violent, but because we're good at war. Too good. If we were allowed to participate in galactic affairs, species would hire us as military advisors, as strategists, as soldiers. We'd shift the balance of power, and the council can't allow that." Kira turned to Daniel. "Is this why you were on Prelium Station? To gather evidence of council manipulation?" "Yes," Daniel admitted. "We've been building a case for years, trying to prove to the galaxy that the Council isn't the benevolent organization it claims to be. But evidence alone isn't enough. We need allies, species willing to stand up and demand change. We need someone with diplomatic credentials, with a reputation for integrity, to present our case." "You want me to be your spokesperson?" Kira realized. "That's why you saved me. Not out of compassion, but because I'm useful." Daniel's expression softened. "I saved you because it was the right thing to do," he said. "Everything else came after. But yes, we need your help. You're the perfect person to challenge the Council's lies about humanity. You've worked within their system, believed in their mission, and now you've seen how they really operate. Your testimony would carry weight." "And if I refuse?" Kira asked. "If I want no part of this resistance, this rebellion, then you're free to leave," Lisa said. "We won't hold you against your will. Boss will take you anywhere you want to go. But understand this, the moment you leave our protection, you're on your own. The Council will hunt you. Price won't stop until you're in custody or dead. And the war you tried to prevent will consume millions of lives while the Council sits back and watches." Kira walked to the viewport, looking out at the asteroid field beyond. Somewhere out there, the war was raging. People were dying. And the Council, the organization she had devoted her life to serving, was allowing it to happen. "Tell me about the restrictions," she said without turning around. "Tell me the real reason humans are forbidden." Lisa exchanged a glance with Daniel before speaking. 12,000 years ago, before the Council was formed, the galaxy was in constant warfare. Hundreds of species, all fighting for resources, territory, survival. It was brutal, bloody, endless. Then 5 species, the founders, came together and created the Council. They established rules, mediation systems, peacekeeping forces. Slowly, over thousands of years, they brought most of the galaxy under their control. I know the history, Kira said, but you don't know what they did to maintain that control, Lisa continued. They identified species that could threaten their dominance and either incorporated them carefully or suppressed them entirely. Humans fell into the suppression category. When they found Earth 2,000 years ago, they ran simulations, war games, predictive models. In 78% of scenarios where humans were allowed to develop freely, we became a dominant military force within 3 centuries. In 43%, we reformed or replaced the Council entirely within 5 centuries. So they locked you away out of fear, Kira said. Out of self-preservation, Daniel corrected. The Council isn't evil, Kira. They've done enormous good for the galaxy. But they're also entrenched, bureaucratic, resistant to change. They saw humans as a threat to their stability, and they chose stability over freedom. Kira turned back to face them. What makes humans so dangerous? What did their simulations show? Lisa smiled grimly. We adapt, faster and more completely than any other species they've encountered. Put a human in any environment, any situation, and we'll learn, improvise, overcome. We're not the strongest species, not the smartest, not the fastest, but we're the most versatile. And in warfare, versatility is everything. That's why Daniel knew the station layout, Kira realized. Why he could pilot through that asteroid field, operate weapon systems he'd never seen before. Humans just figure things out. It's not magic, Daniel said. It's pattern recognition, creative problem solving, and a willingness to take risks that other species avoid. Humans have been fighting each other for our entire history. We've developed strategies, tactics, technologies for every conceivable type of warfare. When we were discovered, we just invented antimatter weapons, and we're 3 months away from testing our first wormhole drive. The Council saw that and panicked. They should have panicked, a new voice said. Kira turned to see a young human man entering the chamber, carrying a data pad. Sorry to interrupt, but we've got a situation. The war between the Vexori and Thelians just escalated. The Vexori deployed a biogenic weapon on Thelia Prime. Casualty estimates are in the millions. Kira felt her blood freeze. Thelia Prime was her homeworld. Her family lived there, her friends, her colleagues, everyone she had ever known. No, she whispered, grabbing the data pad from the young man's hands. The reports were horrific. The weapon had been designed to target Thelian biology specifically, causing cellular breakdown within hours of exposure. 3 major cities had been hit, and the contagion was spreading. The Council will intervene, Kira said desperately. They'll deploy peacekeeping forces, medical aid, they'll stop this. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. She pulled up the Council's official response on the datapad, reading words that meant nothing, promises of concern and investigation that would lead nowhere. The Council would let this play out, let the Vexori and Thelians destroy each other, and then step in to pick up the pieces. I need to go home, Kira said. I need to help them. You can't, Lisa said gently. The moment you show up on Thelia Prime, you'll be arrested, and you can't help anyone from a prison cell. Then what can I do? Kira demanded, her voice breaking. My people are dying. My family is dying. What good is any of this resistance, this evidence, this talk of Council corruption, if I can't save them? Daniel stepped forward, taking the data pad from her shaking hands. "We can save them," he said quietly, "but not through official channels, not through diplomacy or negotiations. We save them the way humans have always saved people. We fight one small resistant cell against the Vexori Imperium," Kira said bitterly. "That's suicide. We're not alone," Lisa said. She activated the view screen again, and this time it showed a star map. Dozens of locations were marked across Council space. These are human resistance cells, hidden settlements, secret bases. We've been preparing for this for decades. We have ships, weapons, trained personnel. We've been waiting for a cause worth revealing ourselves for. "This is it," Daniel said. "This is the moment we've been preparing for. We can deploy medical teams to Thelia Prime, specialists who understand human-developed bioweapons countermeasures. We can insert strike teams to take out Vexori weapons facilities, prevent further attacks. We can do in days what the Council will spend months debating, and in doing so, reveal your existence to the entire galaxy," Kira said. "The Council will see it as an act of war." "Let them," Lisa said fiercely. "We're done hiding. We're done accepting the Council's judgment that we're too dangerous to be free. If saving your people means starting a conflict with the Council, then that's a conflict we're ready for." Kira looked at the faces around her. These humans who had been imprisoned by laws they hadn't agreed to, restricted by fears they hadn't earned, and who were now willing to risk everything to save people who had been taught to fear them. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you help the Thelians? You owe us nothing. We've supported your quarantine for 2,000 years. Daniel took her hand, and his touch was warm, steady, human. "Because that's what humans do," he said simply. "We help. Even when it's hard, even when it's dangerous, even when the people we're helping don't deserve it or wouldn't do the same for us. It's what makes us human. It's what the Council has always been afraid of, not our capacity for violence, but our capacity for compassion." Kira made her decision. "What do you need me to do?" The operation began within hours. Lisa's resistance cell was larger and better equipped than Kira had imagined, with resources that must have taken decades to accumulate. Ships lifted off from hidden hangars carved into the asteroid, each one crewed by humans who had spent their lives preparing for a moment like this. Kira worked alongside Daniel in what they called the Coordination Center, helping to identify targets and plan insertions. Her knowledge of Thelian infrastructure and Vexori military doctrine proved invaluable. She knew which cities would be hit next, which facilities the Vexori would target, which supply lines could be disrupted. "Here," she said, pointing to a map of Thelia Prime's northern continent, "the Vexori will attack this medical complex next. It's the primary research facility for contagious diseases. If they destroy it, we'll lose our best chance at developing a cure." "We'll have a team there within 3 hours," Daniel said, marking the location. "What about defenses?" "Minimal. The Thelians never thought they'd need to defend medical facilities from direct attack. It's against galactic law." "The Vexori stopped caring about galactic law when they deployed bioweapons," Daniel said grimly. He turned to a group of humans gathered around a tactical display. "Team 7, you're on medical facility protection. Rules of engagement are defensive only. We're not here to fight the Vexori directly, just to protect civilians and infrastructure." "Understood?" The team leader, a woman named Kelly Ross, nodded. "Understood. We'll keep them safe." Over the next 12 hours, human teams deployed across Thelian space. Medical specialists arrived in the affected cities, bringing with them treatments that should have been impossible. The biogenic weapon the Vexori had used was based on old human research, something from Earth's pre-contact wars. The humans recognized it immediately and knew how to counter it. Thousands of lives were saved in the first day alone. But the Council noticed. How could they not? Unidentified ships appearing in active war zones, advanced medical treatments being distributed without authorization, mysterious defenders protecting critical infrastructure. Commander Helen Price was dispatched to investigate, bringing with her a fleet that could obliterate the resistance if she found them. "We need to buy more time," Lisa said during an emergency strategy session. "Price is getting close to tracking our ships. If she follows them back here, we're done." "Then we give her something else to chase," Daniel said. He looked at Kira. "We need to go public, broadcast everything we know about Council manipulation, about the human quarantine, about why this war was allowed to happen. We need to turn public opinion before Price can silence us. That'll paint a target on our backs," Kira said. "The target's already there," Daniel replied. "We just need to make sure the galaxy is watching when the Council tries to shoot." They spent the next hours preparing the broadcast, compiling evidence, crafting a message that would resonate across hundreds of species. Kira would be the face of it, the Thelian diplomat who had discovered the truth. And Daniel would stand beside her, the human who wasn't supposed to exist. As they worked, Kira found herself watching Daniel, really seeing him for the first time since their chaotic escape from Prelium Station. He moved with confidence, spoke with authority, led with a natural charisma that made people want to follow him. But there was also a gentleness to him, a care for the people around him that contradicted everything she had been taught about humans. "You're staring," Daniel said, without looking up from the speech he was drafting. "I'm trying to reconcile you with what I was taught," Kira admitted. "The Council said humans were dangerous, violent, unable to control their aggressive impulses. But you and your people are risking everything to save mine." "It doesn't match." Daniel finally looked at her, and his expression was sad. "Humans are dangerous," he said. "We are violent when we need to be. But we're also capable of incredible compassion, loyalty, sacrifice. The Council saw our capacity for war and decided that was all we were. They never looked deeper, never tried to understand that the same traits that make us good at fighting also make us good at protecting. You can't have one without the other." "I'm starting to understand that," Kira said quietly. Before Daniel could respond, alarms began blaring. Voss ran into the coordination center, his 4 eyes wide with panic. "Price found us. She's got 6 warships incoming, weapons hot. We have maybe 10 minutes before they're in firing range." Lisa swore. "We're not ready. We haven't finished evacuating the medical wing." "Then we hold them off," Daniel said. He turned to Kira. "Can you finish the broadcast alone? You were always going to be alone when you delivered it. This was always going to come down to one person standing up and telling the truth." He squeezed her hand. "I believe in you." Then he was gone, running to join the defense teams. Lisa followed, barking orders into a communicator. Kira stood alone in the coordination center, surrounded by evidence of Council corruption, human resilience, and the very real possibility that they were all about to die. She sat down at the broadcast terminal and began to record. "My name is Kira Thelax," she said, looking directly into the camera. "I am a diplomat of the Thelian Confederacy, and I am here to tell you that everything the Council has taught us about humanity is a lie." The words poured out of her. Everything she had learned, everything she had seen. She showed the intercepted communications, the evidence of Council manipulation, the proof that the war had been allowed to happen. And she spoke about the humans, about their desperate struggle for freedom, about their willingness to risk everything to save people who had helped imprison them. Outside, she could hear weapons fire, The station shook as Council warships began their assault. But Kira kept talking, kept recording, kept telling the truth even as the world fell apart around her. She was nearly finished when Daniel burst back into the coordination center, his armor scorched and his weapon empty. "We need to go," he said. "Now Price is deploying boarding teams. I'm not done. Kira, we're out of time." "Then you go," she said calmly. "Get everyone else out. I'll hold them off long enough to finish the broadcast and make sure it reaches every comm relay in Council space." Daniel stared at her. "You'll die." "Probably," Kira agreed. "But this message needs to reach the galaxy. People need to know the truth. That's more important than my life." For a moment, Daniel didn't move. Then he did something Kira didn't expect. He pulled off his helmet and kissed her. Fierce and desperate and real. "You're my wife," he said when he pulled back. "According to Council law, according to every protocol and restriction they've built, you're bound to me for life. That means I don't leave you behind." He sat down at the defense console beside her terminal. "You finish your broadcast. I'll make sure no one interrupts you." So Kira spoke her final words. Her call to action, her plea for the galaxy to question the system that had governed them for 10,000 years. And Daniel fought, holding the corridor outside the coordination center against Council security forces that should have overwhelmed him in seconds. But he was human, and humans were very good at fighting. When Kira finally hit the transmit button, broadcasting her message across every frequency, every relay, every communication network she could reach, Daniel was still holding the line. His armor was barely functional. His improvised barricade was falling apart, but he was still fighting. Kira grabbed a weapon she barely knew how to use and went to stand beside him. If this was how it ended, she would face it with the being who had shown her what courage really meant. Together, they waited for the final assault. But it never came. Instead, the Council forces retreated, falling back through the corridors in confusion. Commander Price's voice crackled over every speaker in the station. "Cease fire. All teams, cease fire and withdraw." Kira and Daniel exchanged confused glances. Through the smoke and debris, they made their way back to the coordination center. The view screens were alive with activity, thousands of messages flooding in from across the galaxy. The broadcast had worked. Kira's message had reached billions of beings, and the response was overwhelming. Protests erupted on dozens of worlds, demanding answers from the Council. Independent news networks were analyzing the evidence she had provided, verifying its authenticity. Species that had been silent for centuries were suddenly speaking out, sharing their own stories of Council manipulation and suppression. The galaxy was waking up, and the Council couldn't silence everyone. "We did it," Kira whispered, barely believing the words. Lisa appeared on one of the screens, transmitting from a ship that had escaped the battle. "Not quite," she said. "The Council is regrouping. They're calling for an emergency session to address the allegations, but they've also issued a galaxy-wide warrant for your arrests. You two need to disappear for a while." "Where would we even go?" Daniel asked. Lisa smiled. "I have an idea, but you're not going to like it. Earth, the human homeworld, forbidden to outsiders for 2,000 years, locked away behind Council enforcement fleets and monitoring stations. But as Daniel explained during the long journey there, the Council's control over Earth was far from absolute. They have satellites, defense platforms, inspection stations," he said as their small ship approached the blue and green world. "But they can't watch everything. Humans have been sneaking on and off Earth for decades, using routes they don't know about, hiding in the margins of their surveillance systems. Kira watched Earth grow larger in the viewport, a world she had only seen in classified briefings. It looked peaceful, beautiful, completely at odds with the narratives of violence and chaos the Council had spread. "What will we do there?" she asked. "We'll rest," Daniel said. "Recover. And we'll plan our next move. Because this isn't over, Kira. What we started, what your broadcast began, it's going to force the Council to make a choice. They can either admit their mistakes and start reforming, or they can double down and try to crush the dissent. Either way, there's going to be conflict, and you'll be ready for it." "We'll be ready for it," Daniel corrected. "You're part of this now, whether you wanted to be or not." They landed in a remote region, far from the monitoring stations. Humans met them there, resistance members who had been living on Earth in secret, preparing for the day when their people would be free. They welcomed Kira warmly, treating her not as an outsider but as a hero who had risked everything for them. It was humbling and overwhelming in equal measure. Daniel took her to a small house overlooking the ocean, a place where they could be alone, where they could finally stop running. As the sun set over the water, painting the sky in colors Kira had never seen on her homeworld, she found herself crying. "What's wrong?" Daniel asked, sitting beside her. "I don't know if I did the right thing," Kira admitted. "I've destroyed the career I spent decades building. I've made enemies of the most powerful organization in the galaxy. I've put a target on my back that will never go away. And for what? Your people are still imprisoned. The war is still raging. Nothing has really changed?" "Everything has changed," Daniel said gently. "You told the truth when it would have been easier to stay silent. You stood up when you could have walked away. You proved that one person, one voice, can make a difference. The rest will take time, but you started something that can't be stopped now." "I'm scared," Kira whispered. "So am I," Daniel admitted. "But we're together, and that counts for something." They sat in silence as night fell, two beings from different worlds, bound together by circumstance and choice, facing an uncertain future. Behind them was everything they had known. Ahead was chaos, conflict, and the very real possibility of failure, but also hope. The hope that the galaxy could be better, that systems could change, that beings who had been silenced could finally be heard. And sometimes, Kira thought, that was enough. The weeks that followed were strange and peaceful. Kira learned about Earth, exploring the world that had been forbidden to her, meeting humans who lived lives remarkably similar to beings across the galaxy. They had families, communities, art and music and literature. They laughed and cried and dreamed and loved. They were nothing like the monsters the Council had described. She also learned about Daniel, about the person beneath the soldier and resistance fighter. He had been born on Earth after the quarantine, had grown up in the shadows of Council enforcement stations, had trained from childhood to fight for humanity's freedom. But he also loved ancient human poetry, could cook elaborate meals from dozens of different cultural traditions, and played a stringed instrument called a guitar with surprising skill. One evening, as they walked along the beach near their temporary home, Kira asked the question that had been nagging at her since Prelium Station. "Why did you really save me that day?" Daniel was quiet for a moment, watching the waves crash against the shore. "I told you," he said finally, "because it was the right thing to do. But you could have helped other diplomats. There were dozens of people fleeing the station. Why me specifically?" He turned to look at her, and there was something vulnerable in his expression. "Because I've been watching you for 3 years," he admitted. "Part of my assignment was to monitor the peace negotiations, report back on key players, assess who might be sympathetic to our cause. I read every proposal you submitted, watched every session you mediated, tracked every compromise you brokered, and I saw someone who actually cared. who believed in peace not because it served their interests, but because it was right. You were evaluating me as a potential ally. At first, Daniel said, but somewhere along the way, it became more than that. I started looking forward to your speeches at council sessions, to the creative solutions you'd proposed that no one else had considered. I admired your dedication, your refusal to give up even when everyone else had stopped trying. And when I saw those Vexori warriors moving to kill you, I didn't think about the mission or the resistance or any of that. I just knew I couldn't let you die. Kira stopped walking. Daniel, I need you to be honest with me. This marriage, this bond between us, is it real to you, or is it just a legal convenience? He took her hands, his human warmth seeping into her scales. It's real to me, he said quietly. More real than I expected it to be. I know it started as improvisation, as a desperate play to get us both off that station. But these past weeks getting to know you, fighting beside you, seeing your courage and integrity up close, it's become the most real thing in my life. We barely know each other, Kira protested, even as her hearts raced. We've been through more together in a month than most beings experience in a lifetime, Daniel countered. We've faced death, challenged empires, started a movement that might reshape the galaxy. I know you, Kira. Maybe not every detail of your past, every preference and habit, but I know who you are at your core, and that's enough for me. Kira wanted to argue, to point out all the logical reasons why this couldn't work, why a Thelian and a human had no future together. But standing there on the beach with the alien stars above and Daniel's hands in hers, logic seemed less important than the truth she had been avoiding. She cared about him too. This is insane, she said. Absolutely, Daniel agreed, smiling. The galaxy will call it unnatural. They've been calling humans unnatural for 2,000 years. We're used to it. The Council will use our relationship against us, claim it proves humans are manipulative, dangerous. Let them try, Daniel said. We'll prove them wrong by being happy. And then he kissed her again, and Kira stopped thinking about the Council, about the war, about anything except this moment, and this being who had turned her entire world upside down. When they finally returned to the house, they found an urgent message waiting. Lisa's face appeared on the screen, her expression grave. We've got a problem, she said without preamble. The Council has responded to Kira's broadcast. They're calling it propaganda, claiming the evidence was fabricated by human sympathizers. They've convinced most of the major species to dismiss it as a manipulation campaign. Kira felt her brief moment of peace shatter. But the evidence is authenticated. We have encrypted Council communications verified by independent analysts. The Council is discrediting those analysts, Lisa continued, claiming they were paid by the human resistance, that their methods are unreliable. It's working. Public opinion is shifting back in the Council's favor. What about the war? Daniel asked. The Vexori biogenic attacks? Officially under investigation. Unofficially, nothing's being done. The Thelians are begging for help, but the Council keeps stalling. Meanwhile, the Vexori are preparing for a final assault that could wipe out the Thelian government entirely. Kira closed her eyes, fighting back despair. We failed. No, Lisa said firmly. We've hit a setback. That's different. We need to adapt. Come up with a new strategy. What strategy? Kira demanded. We revealed everything we knew and the Council just waved it away. We don't have more evidence. We don't have more proof. All we have is our word, and apparently that's not enough. Daniel put a hand on her shoulder. Then we need to change the game, he said slowly, an idea forming. We need to stop trying to prove the Council is corrupt and start proving that humans aren't dangerous. How? Lisa asked. By ending the war, Daniel said. Not through council mediation or diplomatic negotiations that will take years. We end it ourselves, demonstrate that humans can solve problems the council can't or won't. We become undeniable. You're talking about direct military intervention, Lisa said. That's an act of war against the council. The council's already at war with us, Daniel countered. They just haven't admitted it yet. This way, we force their hand. Either they accept our help and acknowledge that humans can be a force for good, or they attack us and prove to the galaxy that they're more interested in maintaining control than saving lives. Kira looked at him, this human who had become her husband, her partner, her hope. That's incredibly risky. Everything we've done has been risky, Daniel said. But this could work. Think about it, Kira. If we can stop the war, save your people, and do it all without the Council's permission, we demonstrate that their control isn't necessary. We show the galaxy there's another way. And if we fail, then we fail spectacularly, Daniel said with a grim smile. But at least we'll have tried. Kira thought about her homeworld, about the millions dying from bioweapons while the Council debated. She thought about the Vexori, driven by centuries of grievances and the Council's failure to mediate them properly. She thought about all the wars that had been allowed to happen, all the suffering that could have been prevented if someone had been willing to act. "Tell me your plan," she said to Daniel. Over the next hours, they worked out the details. It was audacious, arguably insane, and absolutely in keeping with everything Kira had learned about humans. They would use the Resistance Network to deploy forces to both Vexori and Thelian space simultaneously, not to fight, but to demonstrate that further conflict was futile. They would destroy the Vexori weapons stockpiles, eliminating their ability to deploy more bioweapons, and they would provide the Thelians with defensive technologies that would make them immune to Vexori attacks. They would force both sides to the negotiating table by making continued warfare pointless. "It'll take coordination on a scale we've never attempted," Lisa said. "Every human cell in the galaxy will need to act simultaneously. If even one team fails, the whole operation could collapse." "Then we make sure no one fails," Daniel said. "We train, we prepare, and we execute with precision. Humans are good at that. We'll also need Kira's help," Lisa added. "We need someone who understands Thelian defenses, Vexori military doctrine, the political dynamics at play. This operation needs both human capabilities and insider knowledge." Kira nodded. "I'll do whatever's necessary." They spent the next 3 weeks preparing. Kira worked with human strategists, sharing everything she knew about both civilizations. She helped identify targets, plan insertions, anticipate responses, and she watched as the humans around her transformed from hidden refugees into a coordinated military force. It was terrifying and inspiring in equal measure. The night before the operation launched, Kira couldn't sleep. She found Daniel outside, staring up at the stars. "Second thoughts?" he asked as she joined him. "Thousands of them," Kira admitted. "We're about to start a conflict that could consume the entire galaxy. The Council won't stand by while we undermine their authority." "No, they won't," Daniel agreed. "But they also can't let millions of Thelians die while they debate. We're forcing them to choose between their pride and their principles. Either way, we win. Or we all die." "There's that possibility, too," Daniel said with dark humor. Then his expression softened. "Kira, if something happens to me during this operation—" "Don't," Kira interrupted. "Don't say goodbye. We're going to survive this. Both of us. You don't know that." "No," Kira admitted. "But I choose to believe it anyway, because the alternative is unacceptable." Daniel pulled her close, and they stood together under the alien stars. two beings about to challenge an empire, united by choice and circumstance and something that might have been love. "Whatever happens," Daniel said quietly, "I'm glad I met you. I'm glad you're my wife. Even if the circumstances were ridiculous, you've shown me that hope isn't just for humans. That maybe, someday, the galaxy really can be better. We'll make it better," Kira said fiercely. "Or die trying." The next morning, the operation began. Across the galaxy, human ships emerged from hiding, moving with coordinated precision toward their targets. On Thelia Prime, teams deployed to defend the last remaining research facilities. In Vexori space, strike teams hit weapons depots and manufacturing plants. Not killing, but disabling. Not destroying, but neutralizing. And Kira stood in the Resistance Command Center on Earth, coordinating it all, her diplomatic experience finally being used for something more immediate than endless negotiations. The Council responded within hours. Commander Helen Price arrived at Earth with a fleet, demanding the humans stand down. When they refused, she prepared to attack. But then, something unexpected happened. The Thelians spoke up, not the government, which was still firmly in the Council's pocket, but ordinary Thelian citizens who had been saved by human medical teams, protected by human defenders. They broadcasted their own testimonies, their own evidence of human compassion and competence. They demanded their government acknowledge what the humans had done. And species across the galaxy listened. The Vexori, finding their weapons neutralized and their tactical advantage gone, agreed to talks, real talks, mediated not by the Council but by independent arbiters, with humans serving as observers to ensure fairness. Within a week, a ceasefire was in place. Within 2 weeks, preliminary peace agreements were being drafted. The war that should have consumed millions of lives for years was ending, not through Council intervention, but despite Council obstruction. And humanity's role in that peace couldn't be denied or dismissed. Commander Price stood down, her fleet withdrawing from Earth's orbit. The Council called for an emergency session, and for the first time in 2,000 years, humans were invited to participate. Daniel and Kira prepared to represent humanity at that session, knowing they would face hostility, skepticism, and outright opposition. But they also knew they had changed something fundamental, had proven that the galaxy didn't have to accept the Council's word as law. On the day they were scheduled to address the Council, Kira found herself more nervous than she had been during any battle. This was her old world, the system she had once believed in, and she was about to stand before it as a revolutionary. "You'll be brilliant," Daniel said as they prepared to board the ship that would take them to the Council chambers. "I'm terrified." "Good," Daniel said. "Fear means you understand what's at stake. Use it." They arrived at the Council chambers to find it surrounded by protests. Thousands of beings from hundreds of species demanding change, demanding accountability, demanding that humans be heard. The Council had tried to suppress the movement, but it had grown too large, too diverse. Inside the chamber, the 5 founding species sat in their traditional positions of authority, their expressions ranging from hostile to curious. Behind them sat representatives from hundreds of other species, all waiting to hear what the humans would say. Kira and Daniel stood together at the center of the chamber, united. "Members of the Council," Kira began, her voice steady despite her fear. "I stand before you not as a diplomat of the Thelian Confederacy, though that was once my identity. I stand before you as someone who has seen the truth behind the systems that govern our galaxy. I married a human, lived among humans, fought alongside humans, and I am here to tell you that everything you have taught us about them is wrong." The chamber erupted in noise, but Kira pressed on. "Humans are not monsters. They are not uncontrollable weapons waiting to explode. They are people with the same capacity for good and evil, compassion, and cruelty that exists in every species. The only difference is that you feared their competence more than you valued their freedom, and that fear has cost the galaxy dearly. Daniel stepped forward. For 2,000 years my species has been imprisoned, he said. Not for crimes we committed, but for potential crimes you imagined we might commit. You ran simulations and decided we were too dangerous to be free. But simulations aren't reality. You never gave us a chance to prove who we really are. We gave you that chance, one of the council founders said. An ancient being whose species named Kira had forgotten, and you immediately interfered in a sovereign conflict, violated countless treaties, and threatened council authority. We saved millions of lives, Kira shot back. While you debated and delayed, while you allowed a war to rage because it served your political interests, humans acted. They did what you were supposed to do but wouldn't. They protected the innocent, stopped the killing, and forced peace when you had given up on it. At what cost? Another founder demanded. You've destabilized the balance of power, encouraged other species to question council authority, undermined 10,000 years of careful governance. Maybe that governance needed to be undermined, Daniel said quietly. Maybe a system that imprisons an entire species out of fear, that allows wars to rage for political convenience, that silences dissent and punishes truth-tellers. Maybe that system needs to change. The chamber fell silent. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, from the back of the chamber, a delegate from a species Kira didn't recognize stood up. I support the humans, the delegate said. My people have been marginalized by the Council for centuries, our concerns dismissed, our needs ignored. If the humans are willing to stand up to this system, then we stand with them. Another delegate rose. Then another. Then dozens. Species that had been silent for millennia suddenly finding their voices, emboldened by humanity's example. The founders looked at each other, clearly not prepared for this level of opposition. The senior founder, the ancient being, finally spoke. What do you want? They asked Daniel and Kira. What would satisfy you? Freedom, Daniel said simply. An end to the quarantine, recognition of human rights, participation in galactic affairs without restriction. We want what every species deserves. The chance to prove ourselves through our actions, not be judged by your fears. And oversight, one founder said quickly. Humans would still need to be monitored, their military capabilities restricted. No, Kira said firmly. No more special restrictions, no more surveillance. Humans get the same rights and responsibilities as every other species. If they abuse those rights, they face the same consequences. But they don't start from a position of assumed guilt. The negotiations that followed lasted for days. The council wasn't willing to simply capitulate, but they also couldn't ignore the will of hundreds of species demanding change. Compromises were reached, agreements drafted, new frameworks established. In the end, the quarantine was lifted. Not immediately, and not without conditions, but the path to freedom was finally open. Humans would be allowed to leave Earth, to establish colonies, to participate in galactic commerce and diplomacy. They would have representatives on the council, voices in the debates that shaped policy. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. As Kira and Daniel left the council chambers after the final vote, they found themselves surrounded by reporters, diplomats, and beings who wanted to thank them or curse them, or simply understand what had happened. How does it feel, one reporter asked, knowing you've changed the galaxy? Daniel and Kira looked at each other, exhausted and relieved and still processing everything that had occurred. Ask us in a few years, Kira said finally. Right now, we're just trying to survive each day. They returned to Earth, to the small house overlooking the ocean. to a moment of peace before the chaos of implementation began. The work ahead would be enormous. Humans would need to integrate into galactic society, learn new systems, build new relationships. There would be resistance, setbacks, conflicts. But there would also be hope. "What do we do now?" Kira asked as they sat on the beach, watching the sun set over the water. "We live," Daniel said simply. "We figure out how to be married for real instead of just legally. We help our people navigate this new reality. We keep fighting for the changes we believe in." "That sounds exhausting." "It probably will be," Daniel agreed. "But we'll do it together." Kira leaned against him, feeling his warmth, his strength, his very human determination. She thought about the path that had led her here, from respected diplomat to revolutionary, from believing in the council to challenging it, from fearing humans to marrying one. "I have a question," she said suddenly. "Only one? When you were watching me for 3 years, evaluating me as a potential ally, did you ever think it would end like this?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, no. I thought maybe you'd help us quietly, provide information, use your diplomatic access to our advantage. I never imagined you'd throw away everything to stand with us. I never imagined you'd become one of us." "Is that what I am now?" Kira asked. "One of you?" "You're one of us," Daniel confirmed. "And we're one of you. That's what marriage means, right? Becoming part of each other's stories, fighting each other's battles, sharing each other's burdens." "The council was right about one thing," Kira said softly. "Humans are dangerous, but not in the way they thought. You're dangerous because you make people believe things can change. You make people want to fight for something better. You're dangerous because you give people hope. Is that a bad thing?" "No," Kira said, taking his hand. "It's the best thing in the galaxy." They sat together as night fell, two beings from different worlds, united by chaos and choice and something that had definitely become love. Behind them was a galaxy in flux, systems changing, powers shifting, a new era beginning. Ahead was uncertainty, challenge, and the hard work of turning revolutionary ideals into practical reality. But also possibility. The possibility that the galaxy could be better, that species could work together as equals, that freedom was worth the risks that came with it. And sometimes, Kira thought, possibility was all you needed to start building something new. Years later, when historians tried to identify the moment everything changed, they would point to different events. Some would cite Kira's broadcast, the moment truth was spoken to power. Others would point to the operation that ended the Vexori-Thelian War, the demonstration of human competence. Still others would focus on the council session where hundreds of species found their voices. But Daniel and Kira would always remember the moment on Prelium Station, when a human saved a diplomat's life without knowing how it would change the galaxy. That split-second decision, that choice to help someone who needed it, had sparked a revolution, and that, they agreed, was the most human thing of all.